Hey everyone, Happy New Year, and we want to say Happy New Year and welcome to the very first Radiotopia Presents of 2024. It's a series that we are truly excited about. It's called Shocking, Heartbreaking, Transformative. Now, this is from documentarian Jess Shane, who put out an open call on Craigslist and then worked with 4 strangers to explore the standard rules that documentarians and journalists use to tell their subject stories. So the series gets into all sorts of questions about what happens when people's real lives are collected, edited, and consumed. The show pulls back the curtain on what goes on behind the scenes of your favorite nonfiction shows. And then it turns in on itself and some really interesting twists and turns along the way in the making of the show. I've gotten to know Jess a little bit over the making of this show. Every time I chat with her, there's a new wrinkle to this story. It is really incredible. So go check out the new Radiotopia Presents series, Shocking, Heartbreaking, Transformative. It is out now on your favorite podcast platform. Hello and welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan. This day, May 11th, 1934, a massive storm sweeps across the Great Plains region of the United States and across the entire country, really, picking up millions of tons of topsoil from the parched farmlands and spreading it, well, everywhere. The plains, of course, were decimated. Farmers in Nebraska and Oklahoma and Kansas and other states lost everything. The winds moved west to east, reaching the East Coast. Dust covered the U.S. Capitol and the Statue of Liberty. Ships, some 300 miles offshore of the East Coast in the Atlantic, reported dust collecting on their decks. That winter of 1934, red snow fell in New England. So here to discuss the dust storms of the mid-30s, the Dust Bowl as it is known, are, as always, Nicole Hemmer of Columbia and Kellie Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Hello, Jody.
Hey there.
So this wind is sweeping west to east, and as I said, reaching all the way to the East Coast. Some of these numbers and just the sort of sheer size of it, Kellie, are just like a little hard to get your head around.
Oh my gosh, it's astounding. It's astounding. So we should say that when, you think about the turn of the 19th century and people are moving west and they are settling all of the Great Plains area, and they're bringing with them, this idea of the plow and that we're going to use this new heartland to cultivate food and wheat and additional crops. And what the problem with that is that they have overdeveloped much of this Great Plains area. And so the grasslands, which traditionally kept the soil damp or wet enough so that you didn't have these massive dust bowls, all of that was sort of eroded. And so because of that, and on top of that, you get a drought. So when there's no rain to keep the ground wet, and then you have all of this cultivation of the soil for agricultural production, it really makes this toxic, dangerous mix, so that when storms come, and these storms are massive. I mean, you have, in one instance in 1934, an estimated 35 million acres of formerly cultivated land is just rendered useless for farming. You have another 125 million acres. That's about an area 3/4 the size of Texas. Like, I can't even imagine that. Has just lost its topsoil, all gone.
Yeah. There's a World War I angle here, too, that in addition to the country spreading and industrialization and farmland, there's also just a demand for wheat, which leads to, I think, a lot of this overplowing.
Yeah, there's a kind of 1-2 punch, and that is all of this land is put into production during World War I so that the U.S. can serve as the breadbasket of the world and supply its troops, supply its European allies, supply people back home. And so you have this overproduction, but that overproduction doesn't stop after the war because there's an agricultural depression that starts in the 1920s where they've created all of this supply, the demand plummets, and the way that they respond is to just try to churn out more and more and more and more. And so they never let the land lay fallow. They never let it recover. And they put all of this land into production. And so by the time the drought hits, you have so much land that was never meant to be this kind of agricultural land being used in this way and utterly devoid of nutrients even before the drought starts.
And no surprise, there's a sort of like real estate speculation, almost
As
bubble
always.
element to this, as always, right? But I mean, we talked about this a little bit when we did the episode about Oklahoma City, but, you know, it was just seen as land that was like, quote unquote, free or there for speculation. And so no one was pumping the brakes on the agricultural boom in this part of the world. And then again, we get this confluence of events. You know, I sort of painted this picture, but the wind is blowing west to east, carrying dust across the country to the east. One thing that happens is it blows dust west to east and it blows people east to west, right? This is where you get a lot of people picking up and moving to California, and you get the, migration to California and what is known as, Okies. They called everyone from the plains Okies when they arrived in California. But you get, this is where a massive number of people end up moving. And just that image of like having to migrate into the winds, into the dust, just sticks with me, right? I mean, I know that the migration during the Dust Bowl was incredibly arduous, but just the fact that you don't have the wind at your back, you're going into the dust, is just something that just sticks with me.
It feels like a movie.
Yeah, well,
I keep thinking of like I don't know what movie.
Well, you get the Grapes of Wrath out of this, right? You get one of the best movies, in my opinion, ever made, right? And you get a lot of good songs from Woody Guthrie. So yes, it is very cinematic.
You do.
Well, and you also get this documentary called The Plow That Broke the Plain. And what happened was that the New Deal is happening during this period as well. And there are all these programs for hiring artists who have been unemployed alongside everyone else. And so they send documentary filmmakers out to the Dust Bowl area, and they capture all of this amazing footage of these giant billowing clouds of dirt just swallowing up entire towns. It's the most marvelous thing to see. And so we have, really for one of the first times, this cinematic capture of this dramatic environmental event, because it's really at the dawn of the moving image age.
It would be really cool, I think, to just, go back and look at some of that footage, because it feels like a dirt monster or something, like one of these like apocalyptic like moments in which everything is not just covered, but if you think about the fact that these particles are being ingested, that, there are people who have gotten gravely sick, if not died, from the inhalation and the digestion of this soil.
I mean, I guess I suppose every story I sort of run through the lens of this last year or so, but I certainly think about COVID when I think about the story of just kind of like these big forces of nature that all of a sudden they show up, and the entire world has to get refracted through that. In a much smaller sense, I'm also thinking about the looming cicada brood that's on the way, and just this idea that like, well, I was trying to explain it to my daughter this morning, and it's just like, well, all of a sudden there's just going to be bugs everywhere. And certainly I think, these moments where we just have to confront nature.
Well, it does have a bit of the biblical plague about it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like the dust swallowing everything, the red snow in New England. You can imagine people kind of feeling
red toads.
Right.
Which in its way leads to great art as well, right? Yes.
Indeed.
So let's talk about the Great Depression coming out of this, and certainly the New Deal. How much does the Dust Bowl flow into the Depression, and how much is this part of what is motivating the New Deal in terms of trying to rebuild the country?
So the New Deal was already underway, but this helps to shape it. The New Deal had this huge environmental component to it, right? Planting trees, building levees, those kinds of things. And so you have this major environmental disaster that's happening just as the federal government is building these huge cores of people who are being sent out to address environmental problems. And so there is a way that the Dust Bowl helps to shape some of those New Deal responses, especially around issues of the environment.
As a response to what was known as Black Sunday and these major Dust Bowls, FDR's administration really has to enforce federal regulation of these lands to reorganize or shift farming methods and how it is done. So they basically include crop rotation, grass seeding, new plowing methods. All of this has to be sort of rethought and reimagined to prevent this from happening again. And while that's effective, I mean, there were able to sort of reduce these dust storms by about 65%.
Yeah.
But none of it really gets quailed until 1939 when the drought ends and we get regular rainfall again, which helps to keep a lot of this dust or topsoil in place.
Yeah. And I mean, that seems Occam's razor, right? The way to end a drought is for it to rain, right? And you can do all sorts of other things, but at the end of the day, if you want to not have dust, you need rain.
The one thing the federal government can't do.
Exactly. Though they've tried, right? They've tried to
seed
seed clouds and so forth. But one small thing as we start to wrap up, it is interesting, though, when you think about you hear that the term Green New Deal, and part of me is like, well, the first New Deal was pretty green too. Like they were planting a lot of trees and they were dealing with a lot of agriculture. Like environmental stuff has always been part of it. It is obviously tied to the economy. So when you think about the economy, you have to think about the environment. And I feel like sometimes we don't realize that the first New Deal included a lot. Sending, as you were saying, Niki, sending tons of people out there to just plant trees to keep the soil down. All right. Well, I think we can wrap up there. We'll probably, I'm sure we will touch on this period of many more times, but let's leave it there. Nicole Hammer, thanks to you as always.
Thanks, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
This Day in Esoteric Political History is a proud member of Radiotopia from PRX, a network of independent, listener-supported, artist-owned podcasts. Our researcher and producer is Jacob Feldman. Our producer is Brittany Brown. You can get in touch with us with any questions or comments or ideas for the show. Email us thisdaypod@gmail.com, or you can find a form at thisdaypod.com. My name is Jody Avirgan. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you soon.
I just blowed in and I got them Dust Bowl blues. I just blowed in and I got them Dust Bowl blues. I just blowed in and I'll blow back out again. I guess you've heard about every kind of blues. I guess you've heard about every kind of blues. But when the dust gets high, you can't even see the sky. I've seen the dust so black that I couldn't see a thing. I've seen the dust so black that I couldn't see a thing. And the wind so cold, boy, it nearly cut your water off. I seen the wind so high that it blowed my fences down. I seen the wind so high that it blowed my fences down. Buried my tractor 6 feet underground.
Radiotopia.